over some feet. And I'll never forget to a grown-ass man over some feet. And, like, you don't think it's real, but it's, like, real. Like, to a point where certain things in life is just like, you gotta laugh at it. You want to mock it because it's just like, no, not my own feet. Like, I can't live with my own feet. Gotta have somebody else's feet. What the fuck? Like, the stories that come up from life itself, it's just fucking disgusting. And then I should break down and go into a whole nother fucking slur about what it really is, what you're really dealing with, and what we're in. But, like, sometimes it just occurred to me, and, like, even though you sit there and you think, magic is magic, but in a whole way of things to do, which is the only way I can incorporate God into it. I at least try to, for what seems so fucking disgusting about the world. But it really gets back to a fucking point where it's like they actually sitting there using each other's ears to listen to each other's bullshit and then try to keep you in the fucking conversation. Like a little centipede of fucking ears, bringing time and energy back and forth from their little bullshit, trying to keep you in a fucking argument with them. They're trying to keep you in a fucking argument with them. Isn't that shit crazy? And then the more you fucking discover, it's like, just throw some ears away or whatever fuck. And they're out there just looking for it. And then like, even when they can have like pure freedom, and the freedom is out there, and you open up all the cheese synapses, and you let them realize what's going on and how they can be free. And they're like, oh, you just another liar. So at that point, you went to auto to find the next set of ears you're gonna listen to bring the other person's bullshit back up to try to force me to listen to it. And after a while, I'm just like sitting here like, well, I know how to get rid of some ears. That's for sure. And it just like, breaks up the synapses into another form that they use where they're like already talking to each other and they're bringing their ears or other people's ears and their crew to you. But it still breaks into another synapsis of like, they can explain this shit to parts of the world in like different objectives and different way people think, that it can still kind of travel and work its way around to you. And it's pretty fucking crazy that people do that kind of shit. And what they want from it, I don't know. And I don't even want to give them any excuses, but there are certain ways that I have to look at, or I try to look at it, to make sure that there's enough room for everything in a modern day facet, besides the fact that it just seems disgusting even for what modern day should know or has to know. Other than the small reasons that it was ever allegorical at all. Other than the certain forms of religion, which was still, profit, paradise, people's perception and understanding. Hopefully not a fucking parasite, but, by the end of it. So let's start off here, just so I remember where I'm going to start off with this, because this is like, I guess, private, but also very open dimensional, to a point where you'll understand at least how to look at some of the world. So let's say that there's this little tiny orb named Tweetie. We're going to name it Tweetie because that thing is supposed to be somewhat nice and not a complete homicidal, like, young girl or some weird, crazy shit. So anyway, but Tweetie is a normal little fucking bird that's supposed to be able to talk on your shoulder, like heaven or hell on each shoulder, or whatever the fuck. So anyways, Tweetie started off a very normal way. Now, Tweetie was not a, sub-personality or second personality or anything like that. It's just a tactical understanding for why anyone would know that there's a fucking spiritual orb in their fucking life near their shoulder, in front of them 3 feet or so, or whatever, to the left or the right side, whatever permits symmetry and comfort. Most people don't even know that it's there, as most augments in reality, no one has any idea that they're not in a 6-foot slab of fucking concrete already anyway, which would be given hence fate or other subjective matters of reality, or how often you actually have to beam housing from just the sheer physics of what reality is. So because you have to have a certain amount of beams and weight and pound per square inch in normal housing, most of those things that are in reality, that are invisible, that you can and cannot see, are assumed to already be there every 500 and 900 yards anyway. So since the world is subconsciously and visually invisible and still is very much reality, it's not that those things aren't there, it's that the comprehension of those things in your reality, in the physical reality that modern day human beings exist in, with prevalence, is the understanding that that's probably somewhat pseudo true. So whether you're in a maze or a construct of what reality actually is to have a home, you have a bathroom, you have a sink, you have utilities, you have all these customs of modern things that are all a variety of necessities that you are supposed to have, destined to have as part of thing, and aligns with all of life. So those are in most situations like guarantees or pseudo facts for what the abundance of reality is. So if you walk into an invisible room or a housing or something like that, which let's say your dojo isn't full of any of these things, which of course it does have, sink, running water, most of those things, okay? Unless you're in a foreign country, which would actually be a great experience, because down to the grassroots of, things would be like, wow, they're missing things there. So there's dimensions that are actually even more invisible there, more hollow and more open and more loud in those areas, which is just an insight on being a poor person, which can actually be deluxe luxury sometimes, but whatever. Anyway, let's not get my bias involved in this. So anyway, Tweetie's dimension would be full of a lot of things. But let's say that's not Tweetie, that's just overall reality having its own Tweetie, if you can't understand the concept of a little spiritual orb being made by some fucking kid and then having to sit there and logistically work out what isn't an orb if it's not the world. Because essentially I didn't think that was the world. So anyway, so the orb inside of it has, some girls, some boys, some figments of, alterverse subconscious of these people, alternate universes and realities of what those people might have thought or didn't think, and so on and so forth, with things that will never be used or probably never thought anyway. Aside the fact of that, not relative to or subjective to only the fact that there is some jails inside of there. So, Tweetie's friend had some boyfriends or some ex-boyfriends who had been done some time in the slammer, and so on and so forth. So there's conflict logic, purgatory, penitentiary, and prisons in there. So all those things being in the aforementioned of things that are not pseudo to most normal human beings, or on the forethought of visible, are now psychologically somewhat pronounced but not visible within Tweetie. Tweetie does not talk yet again, and Tweetie is not a subconscious personality. These are just things within reality that are concepts and precogs and non-entities of things that just exist in reality that have to abide by to what fate is, which has to have with, since there is innocence, there is punishment. Since there's rules, there are punishments for those rules, or barriers or guidances to those rules. So, anyways, that being said, Tweetie is full of a lot of those things. So when you start adding up different things and let's say fruit to the devices of what Tweetie ends up being, or this spiritual orb, you're stuck with the fact that you have other things like, other utilities like electricity, TV. Let's throw in this extra a non-factor in there, or non-entity in there, that since all being is a living thing, let's say, or not a living thing, which it has a choice in those matters, all of those things in due propers, that if all energy is created equal and cannot break or but can only change, and so on and so forth, all this falls into the bracket of Tweetie has a choice whether she is air or electricity, or he or whatever entity, binary, has a choice on whether it's goddamn electricity or air. So that comes into play of like, why would I need circuits if we're already living in Tesla? Now we're not, none of this is true, but give it to this factor that while no one's looking, Tweety seems to have the constant understanding that if I could just do whatever the hell I want, and I have these rules of happiness and these rules of tidiness and these rules of comfort for a human being and so on and so forth, or little hip knocks, as you would say, or whatever, because the world knows it's taking care of you. Let's say the non-entity God knows that it's raising you. It literally knows that, or at least to me, it was very clear with me that it knew it was fucking raising me or some shit. So anyway, and I had one of those type of parents that was just kind of like out to sea or whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? Kind of like non-recipient parenting. Like, you know, they're just like at work or not in the incognito of what the hell is going on in people's minds or whatever. So anyways, I wasn't psychic or anything, nothing like that. But anyways, back to the fucking point. So with all these things being added up, and whether it can choose or not, whether it's like electricity, air, isn't it just easier for entity to accept the fact that why would I do this with your TV and your video game and all this other stuff in your life if I could just automatically be air? So that's when you have that weird moment in fate that comes up on, does electricity leap from one circuit to another? Yes, it does. The answer is that why the fuck would it give a shit if it could just be air and it could be electricity, because it understands every mask that it wears. It understands all your games. It understands all of these rules. It understands its unanimity within the entire universe, a concept of what it is as an entity or as a non-entity. So within that being life or death or electricity or air, in the simple choice of like, oh, you wanted to play some PS2, young man. They probably did not know whether it was electricity or air at the time, or, well, it very much knew, but just did not give a shit. So, like, you know, your system is working or whatever the fuck. Of course, there's rules beyond that point of, like, you know, how the hell did I find this? What is this? Of course, there was electrical socket, you know, so on and so forth. All these rules fit into why entity would not be able to process the fact of, like, it just could but doesn't really just come out of thin air and do magic things for you unless you think you're commanding something. That goes up to a point of like how you choose to grow, how you choose to evolve, how you choose to live your life. But by the end of it, there are some morality gauges and rules with in the opinion of the complex of power, and do you deserve power, respect, and the relativity that comes with the responsibility of what power comes with. And that includes, why is whipping a good thing? Is whipping a tool? Is violence a sanction for comprehension? Is violence a better way of communicating? These are all things that you would have to answer to entity, and that's a big ass red button. Never fucking push it, at least I don't. I'm not into any of that kind of stuff, so when it comes back into my mutuality for peace or whatever, or the extent of that into what would be something else, let's just say that it would be better to just trip out and be having a good fucking time with whatever the fuck the thing is. Not that it has that kind of a embodiment in life, because it would be like if anything was anything and everything, and I love nothing more than sleep, then why would I give a shit about anything unless it was not like already as stated or implied, or that the fact is that living would include something as a fact. So for the fact that it's already living and probably just somewhat of a auto dialer switch, it probably just already knows to live. Now, I'm not trying to describe life or power itself, which is, because I don't even want to call it power, because I don't use power the same way other people do, or think about it the same way other people do, or at least from what modern day convention is for me, or what stems to in the results. And I'm not one of those people that likes to nitpick or find things wrong, but let's just put it this way: I can't accept modern day reality with a lot of those things for what the word power has come to mean, and what we have to accept as a people in order to move on from scenarios in life like 6 foot of concrete or 6 foot of dirt. You know what I mean? Like, we are literally in a cube and no one has any idea what the paradox actually is. My paradox to this is that in modern day reality, in the conceptualization for what we imagine power, magic, intellectualism to be at a present or a formal, tangible understanding, would be that reality metaphysically does not exist, and we are in a purgatorial cube with everyone else who is just as guilty to not make it past the crime. So hence the demons win, because they want, nothing but everyone to have the same sin so we can all leave the same box. What the fuck? No. That's just not going to be intellectual, never going to be proper. Threw that away when I was a kid during, rap feudist or whatever the fuck. But anyways, we'll close the door on that. We'll go back to the original point of this. Understanding the conceptualization of Tweety, or the spherical orb that is just around that you may or may not notice is there. All of these concepts seem to lead to the fact that maybe you could give into the idea that there are invisible things around you while you're living in your universe of you. Now, whether we'll talk into more of an adult matter about these things later on, not sexual, an adult matter to privy to these things at a later time, but let's just go into this. Visual physics, light and dark, and how do I describe stereotypical spherical structure? No, that's not the best word to apply from, but solid structure wouldn't be able to begin to describe what the leading up to any kind of arc or well do you see on life to be able to inhabit the comprehension of what that is. So that first being the main key issue for most normal adults. I'm going to throw that away because I found it to be trifle, because it was kind of like, let's put it this way. I knew I was surrounded by other humanities and didn't care, but I was also thinking very human, which I can't go back and hate myself for, because when I faced the facts of reality, it would have been inhuman, and it would have been an atrocity or something of that matter of me to think anything different, because it would have produced different outcomes in what my symbiotic being would have been. So anyway, back to the furthermore point. Given that Tweety now has a inherent ideological comprehension of reality for itself, which it already did, but given now that you may be able to address that or understand that or reflect upon that even slightly, besides the factor that most people get caught up in the game of power and why air is not electricity, which is probably going to be rule number one in your first argument to end, and just admit that air is not electricity. But back to the main fucking point. That all given into a standard that no matter what anyone tells you, all of these things come into some twisted game inside of this orb, where people start to think that because they can have an effect upon this orb or have an effect upon anything in reality, or that leaves them messages between pockets in space between time and all of this shit. All of that crap is nothing, because you will always get back to the one inherent thing. The only thing you really got is you, young man. Now, whether you know this or not, or whether you think Tweety isn't against you or not, which never happened to me, and probably will never happen to you, because you have to look at it objectively. Tweety is like an on and off board. You can only blame yourself for that kind of spiritual or those type of things in life, because those are all like almost man-made constructions or objective understanding things that we have principled into a understanding or intellectual or intelligible way of thinking about it or comprehending it. So that's all mush, crap, and garbage, especially to non-entity at all, or whatever, or binary construction, or whatever the fuck you want to talk about. Now, that reflecting itself on this off and on board switch is a little bit more understandable than like, yeah, I was doing nothing anyways, and like either way, like seeing to make some lights go on and some buttons like appear, and you know, the magical like accordion started playing. So even life gets off on like, ooh, so I hit this next note, oh, and this note, and then ooh, this light turned blue and that one turned red. Oh, and that's cool. If I hit all three of these notes, everybody else like starts screaming and shit, and then there's more lights and shit, and then they start hopping and shit. oh, well, even life begins to understand that. And it's just like, oh, if I do one after the other, a bunch of shit happens, whatever. So by the end of it, let's get back more to the point without it seeming so crazy. The scheme of the piano accordion. It was like fucking, what's it called? So the point is, and I didn't lose my point. I'm just thinking of like, what so many concepts that I want to just suddenly delve into to be like, wow, like fucking Tweety has come a long way. But let's just say that like by the end of it, the layers of reality that already appeared there and could make trouble and didn't, but also could just be constructs to grow and rationalize what your grip and perception is on reality is not supposed to be a base for power, but ultimately could be. And as most adults think about those things, I rationalize that in power or in what's supposed to be a logistical or a logical understanding for mature adults is that would be tools or some other refrain to. So, but you still stuck in the argument with Tweety about whether it's air or electricity, and let's just agree that if you're still a dumbass, maybe entity ate you or did something good with you, because you're gonna have to think about it this way: air is not electricity, and none of that is gonna add up. It knows what it is. It knows how many faces it's wearing. It knows what it's doing for you. It knows it has no real care about it for some reason. It just is just a very mature motherfucker. I don't know why, it just is. So back to the fucking point. So the rest of this linear reflection of what the whole point of explaining this spherical orb to you or invisible things around you that are like tools and complexes for what humanity deals with, that puts you in the limited structure of understanding you are human. So all of the human synapses and things that you're getting that don't create godhood or formality for what unbridled fucking power is, it still has something to do with the fact that you can only reflect that on a human basis. So this blossoms and opens up the creative synapses for you to access the fact that, oh my God, there is other life out there, because all these fucking things were human beings. Tweety would never do this to me. The little spiritual orb would never do this to me. I'm not even Sylvester. So when you put all that shit together and it's just some innocent kid who just kind of gets it or knows how to trip, or for some reason entity just kind of was like, you're an earthling, and just took me along with it and tried to rationalize to the fact that like you may not, have a very good life. This is what I got, and this is what you're gonna need to kind of understand, and they're all gonna try to like trick you and mislead you, and I feel sorry for you because you really living in a world that's like thriving on 30%. We really supposed to be making 110%. We really only putting up like 70%, calling it 90%, and then we're sitting around like proclamizing 1,000% of nothing for the same old 10%, and then we coming back to the ultimate goal of discovering 3 to 5% for no fucking reason, just to argue with 2 or 1% of it. And sometimes you fucking alone doing that, or I'm telling you this, kid, or I'm making it aware to you that you are a 20% kid in a 30% world, and you're gonna have to give it 50% just to fucking survive. And I know that everyone else is gonna think that you're not one of these kids that I just take and and make these beautiful things, but you're gonna live right there. You're gonna do all this little stuff. No one's gonna know what you're nibbling on, and then one day it'll all make sense to you that no one ever fucking knew that entity I was a fucking earthling. And I sit there and I realize myself that it didn't raise me that way, but the thing already thinks more human for us than what you can't take its life, because it can't comprehend the fact that, like, of course I didn't have a life, I'm just you because you fucking live it. So you're gonna have to live with the fact that, like, it knows. So let's break down the whole point of this whole conversation. What was the point of telling you all this? To lead you to the greatest point of mankind. You are a motor vehicle. You are a vehicle. You are a vehicle. 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 You ever notice that without any history, no one knows where these go? You can go through 5, 6 different languages, 7, 8, 9 languages. You can get about 300 different languages. And there's some words in there that sound so alien and so predatory and so unannounceable. I shouldn't say predatory because it'll probably give them the answer. But let's say all of that has a context of we were purchased before we were made to be sold outright to our prohibition of ourselves to have free rights by living. The word vehicle is going to go in that folder for right now. Now, the discovery of mankind is not the discovery of the proliferation of what we are. It's the fact that the very point that I'm making is that you all are a single entity of yourself. You have yourself, you have entity. But like, let's say like, even though you're aware of this, and I would never want to take that away from you or it or us. But let's face the facts. At the end of the day, no one talks in your head. No one owns you. No one has the right over you. You and entity are aware of something. Entity helps you, you help entity. Entity might even clean your feces sometimes without you knowing it. It doesn't touch you in a weird way. It just cleans your stuff and you're just walking down the street smelling like ass. Then you come back home, you smell like roses. Entity cleans you on the way there by eating the dirt and grubby bacteria off of you. And you know it, and I fucking know it. Yeah, go ahead and lie to it. It took care of you and you take care of it. But then when it came back to normal and it's not really, debatable, is it alive, is it not, is it life, is death, this thing is just living. So it should feel the way that it feels for you and for it. That like I'm living, it's living, or we're all just doing some stuff. And then like I don't even notice that like I'm doing all this stuff and it doesn't notice that it's doing all this stuff and having a great time. It should always feel that way. So let's just get something straight. You're always kind of by yourself and entity doesn't count. So even if you're with yourself and that's you, well, let's go back and talk to Hitblocks real quick for a moment. So I'm minding my own fucking business and nobody's ever supposed to be in that kind of business. You just minding your own business, you just living. Now, don't let anybody else try to take ownership of you, to understand you or think that they can talk to you in some certain way, or you know what I mean, or break the shell of who you are as a human being and make you a public person or some shit when you don't have to be. You can go be a human being. You're always allowed that. You're not in a cult. You'll never be in no cult. You won't, or the parts that are enjoyable about cults, but you'll never have to subjugate yourself to any of those things. Those things will never really quite be true. And in the cases where they are slightly true, it's because you were raised that way, or they were grown inherently that way, or there is a non-entital understanding from why the term identical or replica or certain words that are vehicular all seem to come into play with the manufacturing of what a human being actually is. We are bred. Now, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, even though the upper echelon of things that I just said that it seemed incorrect. What all of those things are like a modification of what you want to be at a standard, a true implication of implication of what you wanted as a perfect standard. So it gets up to a certain point where like, okay, that's what you're doing. So you're not growing new organs because you're healing you're healing old organs to new. So no one needs to remember that you remember what a perfectly good organ looks like and how it's taken care of. So hence you got a replicate organ. Okay, whatever. Let's just bypass that and throw that away because like you don't need air and electricity in your life bothering you with slavery in a minuscule amount for everything that you want to do to abide to happiness. Now, the complete unbridled happiness for the wild kit of man. Let's get back to the true giant point and reiterate one more fucking time. You yourself are like a motor vehicle. You own yourself. You can have occupancies in it. You don't need to have occupancies in it. You know it's you in your fucking car. You know it's you. You don't, even if you put a label on it or there was no label on you, you would still know that you're just an occupancy in this fucking thing that you have of yourself, your life, and your body going down the fucking road or doing some fucking thing. No one can ever change that about you. Now, the other people that try to, they're all technically wrong for, or the religious purpose has been ungranted to objective, submersible, or subjugation. But you know, subjugation is different for a lot of people, and I don't want to delve into anything that I know about other religions and so on and so forth, because there'll be three things that you want to ask me, and one is a religion, and I'll tell you the basic one that is the one I cherish the most and am held by in national standard. There's a second religion where it's like, okay, that religion delves into more of like the ABCs of like, oh yeah, this is a well-rounded story that's supposed to be well throughout known to all of us, including some particular barbaric things that you're supposed to need to know. I don't know, just from avoiding and growing and so on and so forth. Then there's the last part where no one remembers our religion because we were on the brink of extinction in another country, and it was never passed down to me but outside of my bloodline, and it was never told to me, so it was just given to me a different way. It's just sad, but like, because of it, I've known to believe it, because it's almost the disregarded things of mankind that has had to become mature in the face of so much sin, wrong, and evil in the world, that the leftover parts that we worship about other, let's say multiple gods or whatever, will live in a flat world. I don't know how to explain it. It's just so sad to know that like a lot of things that are holding us back in the comprehension of certain spiritual realms in life is the fact that we only worship one God, or a very small amount of gods, but you know, theologically or what's it called, monologically, however the hell you want to put it there. Put it this way: we're in a different kingdom, and not all the rulers were human. So, or not all the rulers were human. So anyways, so as you know, atrocity comes from those type of things too, or abominations, so they're no longer spoken of religions and are too old to talk about. Maybe I'll talk about them one day. But anyways, back to the fucking point. The point is that you're supposed to know that as a vehicle, or as a human being, I say that because I want you to get your performance excellence and to feel untamed and unfettered by anything in reality, because eventually you'll learn that you're a lot better off thinking like a car than thinking like a human being that has so many goddamn gradual limits and shit. So anyways, back to the fucking point. That releasing you from that part of reality is the point of explaining Tweety to you, and it was the point of explaining the spherical orb to you, or how dangerous and spiritually complex reality can be without the perception of, can you see other things around you? Can you hear other things around you? Are you universally conceptualized to a point where these things do and don't make any sense at all, absolutely, and is irrational and crazy as hell? All of those things true, except for the one factor that do not fuck with power, do not give a shit, and do not be conceited or tamed by the devil, because by the end of it, it's just like your curiosity and your ability to want to know all that, it's not worth a lot of things. It's a lot of confusion, disgusting things. Like put it this way, all the jail horror fantasies or hallucinations that you heard of are all closer to the truth than the lie about what the inhibition is about the universe. So I should repronounce that word, but I'm not going to because I'm just laying down and I know why I'm not breathing funny. So anyway, back to the point. All of that would make more sense and what you're supposed to collusify about all of those fucking things and what reality is supposed to give you back than the ultimate power of conceptualizing and understanding what all the different facets of physics are and how to physically perceive those things and why it can get confusing at times and why you just don't want to play with that button, shouldn't play with it, and choose to see reality visually through a different complex of Tweety or the spiritual orb or whatever you chose to desire or figured out about life, including other people that have discovered the alternate universes and realities and dimensions from different things of the sixth sense or martial arts, or how some people are able to graft and walk around a room without really knowing where they are and read elements and different things like that, from walk around blindfolded or breathing funny into things or cleaning off too much grease from cars or whatever. Everybody discovers these things in reality, alternate dimensions and different facets of physics from reality itself and doing the fucking job. It's just the way that it is. So that's what I think the whole message is to you, is that remember, like with psychotic abuse, ownership, abusive relationships and all that bullshit, Hypnox's real point is this: you are an owner of yourself. You always have, you always will, and it's always been you. And at worst, if you comprehend Tweety or that sphere, and I recommend not. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with entity. Entity is a really sweet, beautiful thing. Life itself, I prefer not to call him that because he even got barbaric at times, and I wish him nothing but well. But by the end of it, or him or she or whatever, but you know how he is. Like, put it this way, entity is you. So entity is not always a boy or girl. It's not like a sicko car thing, or like my Mustang is like the strongest on the road, but I'm gonna name it a girl because the sweet precious thing can kick all of our asses. It's not that kind of a situation. It's a situation is entity is you, and it'll always kind of be like every time you check, it's always like, no, buddy, that's you, I'm you. Or it always kind of goes that way. So no matter how dumb you are, just don't forget it kind of always goes that way. So anyway, and even when people pretend to be entity, just don't go with that bullshit. It's just you, yourself, and it's probably washing your ass or taking care of you or making you think those type of things. And even if they act that way like a parent or blah, 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 it won't matter because entity is always kind of that type of thing, usually. Unless you did something wrong, or unless it knows something, or unless it has an awareness of something about fate that you need to know. But usually it'll kind of make it kind of clear in such a weird, illegitimate way, because you'll kind of start to see the fact that the thing is literally talking around every obsolete, obsolescentical problem in its possible fucking way to communicate this shit to you through fate, and it still somehow has a little bit of a grip-on way of telling you that shit for your own self, and including how they used to have dreams, but dreams are still technically humans interference and this and that. Because if you ever had a real entity encounter or a real entity hallucination or a moment with you want to say God, but I'll just call entity because it's too, and I'm sure that's one of his best names or something, but God is actually a very confusing name because there's a two-sided face to everything, and God is one of those things where of course I love what everyone means about God, but then if you go back in history, there's this thing that they have for, let's put this in the classification of the Kabbalah and the Illuminati. There's certain places where you go back far enough in history where you can only have the certain amount of prehistory or immortality be described from godlike warriors. Now, in those times, there's not much for history because, there was enslavement. There was a lot of killing people who wrote things or so on and so forth, or members of things. And, you know, they were known as the members, and then the mumblers, and then the debtors, and whatnot. So there's a lot of that kind of history. But then you get back to the basic bold line truth. And like, without so much history and brackets on and life and rules, all of this shit goes to shit a lot, and they forget, and power becomes boring, adolescent, they wander, they remember something else about being human, forget about godhood, so on and so forth, all these different things. But if you go back far enough, or you delve into these things far enough with what is actual fact, you'll see that there's a lot of blueprints and history missing, what should have been made, what shouldn't have been made, so on and so forth. But it gets back to a linear type of an area where, and philosophical debates and ideological debates and deaths between each other, great buildings that people remember but don't remember what it was for. A lot of these things are evidence and signs of them eating each other, cannibalizing godhood, so on and so forth. But if you go back far enough, and as I love God, I'm sorry to say this, but it gets back to a certain point where you go far back enough in all of their history, and all of them are suddenly like giant warriors, and God is one of them. And I just don't want to say this, but you ever had like the thing where they have like a white Bible and a black Bible? There's a different family that comes from the other Bible, and let's just say that before God was a really nice sweetheart or whatever, that dude was like a vicious warmonger with a prototype, I want to call it a prototypical predatorial, animalistic type of mindset. So all the things that were right and wrong were still absolutely correct to do. To, like, if you're going to have the meal, you're going to eat the meat off the bones because you were supposed to have that meal to survive. Now, I'm not saying this about God. I'm saying this about almost all gods. And then the exception that we do have is that there is just a lot of prehistory that you should probably go look and see how bloody and maneful all of it was. So I'm not accusing anything of anything. Just wanted you all to keep that in mind so you won't be shocked about your relationship with God or entity or anything, so on and so forth, beyond or in the consistent base of structure. So anyways, just remember, don't let anyone else convince you anything. The whole point of the conversation was stay out of abusive relationships. Remember that you are yourself. And even if you have an entity or anything like that, it still comprehends itself of being you and you being of it. So, you know, all of those things and abide to. So no matter what holes in logic you see into those things, you own yourself, you love yourself, you care for yourself, and you are here for yourself. And, you know, all that stuff. Don't let anyone convince you. Let's just stay out of that abusive relationship. So anyways, but since we got wrapped up in talking about with Tweety, because I can't help but talk about Tweety or that spherical orb for very long without just going back into, you know, put it this way, don't time travel with women, because it will always turn into the horrible nightmare of, like, you love that person, but you go from dimension to dimension with that person, almost going through these blood feud arguments about what you're supposed to do in that dimension and how that dimension is supposed to look and how you're supposed to arrange that dimension. Or no, I'm just joking with you, but seriously, if you've ever seen the horrible episodes with Duncan MacLeod from Highlander, like, keeps getting this girlfriend back, dying, creates her immortality, and keeps going, ignore that part of Tweety, because Tweety was a fucking little girl, and we were both little kids, like, taking care of each other, and we actually grew up some weird way that way. So I can't explain to you, not in a Highlander way at all, not in a fiction way, but like, we both seem to have understood something about reality that we weren't supposed to know, and, you know, we had to go and be re-raised a little bit of a different way to comprehend why we're not crazy, or why the world is crazy, or why the world isn't crazy, and that all these things are supposed to be things that we're supposed to end up to know and to utilize correctly for the benefit of, God or life or entity itself. Not that it was ever told to us that way, but it just, after a while, you get the hint that it's like, if you're bored, why don't you, like, grow some farms for me or something? You got a farm girl over there, And you know how the world be talking to you like a man sometimes, but it really doesn't have a penis, or it doesn't have a real thing about it, and it just kind of like is like, well, you got a farm girl, why don't you start a farm? Well, you have a girl, so why don't you start a TV? Well, you have a girl right there, so why don't you start a Nintendo? You have a girl right there, so why don't you start a car? Well, you have a girl right there, so why don't you start a house? You have a girl right there, so why don't you start a PS4? You have a girl right there, so why don't you start a PS6? Because PS6 ain't out yet. Oh yeah, I forgot. You have a girl there, so why don't you start up a PS5? You know how life is. It's like a bubblegum shrimp type of fucking shit sometimes. So whatever. But either way, that thing's always on your side, and never get confused. I don't really know if I should reiterate or go into more facts or more deep convalescences about some of these things that I know and why I know them, and I definitely could be up to the test of grade about any of those things and explain them. But it's just like, put it this way, if you are very young or very gifted or very, I don't want to say naive or novice or whatever, but the word is novice, and you're starting off life, most people don't have one universal life, or they have one universal life, but they don't have one, life by themselves. They've lived many lives over, folded over, living multiple dimensions all at once, and they don't even realize it, and don't look anything alike, and aren't even fucking related at all. So, whatever. All that can be fucking true, and is kind of true. There are some small amounts of life, or a few small amounts of life. I don't know how to describe a small amount of life. It's still like a huge fraction. Let's say 10%, just to be naive and mean towards the fact that we hope they're getting laid, but also that if they are getting laid, that they're stupider than all of us, but because they're doing something fun and we're busy. So I don't know, whatever, until we get laid too. But by the end of it, like, it adds up to knowing all these extra facts doesn't create the things that we're all looking for, but it does inherently and root the fact that all of these people's magic endowment, or alternate universes, or different thoughts that kind of parallel to each other, and they still can't figure out what the fuck that thought meant, or like how was I supposed to correlate that, or like how do I get oats from Cheerios and how do I get Cheerios from flat oats? It's just weird, because like even in that area where it's like wheat, oats, and Cheerios, all these things are different and very different, but how do I get all those meanings all at once without anyone even telling me? So it's weird shit like that exists in life, where it's like, of course you know, and of course you don't actually know, but it's still just kind of one of those things where like life has learned to accept itself, that they're all doing a very beautiful, complex thing, and they know how to get along parallel and synonymously with the fact that they're making good product for what their overall tenure is, or for their overall thing. So by the end of it, living multiple lives in multiple dimensions and multiple spiritualities is not a indulgence, it's actually a basic fucking requirement. And you'll start to notice that most of the people that do or strongly don't, up to a certain extent, which wouldn't be just a national thing, it would be like up to a certain extent would be like the ones that are new. It'll be obvious that they're still growing. It'll be obvious that there's a lot less premonitions, and then not only that, like you don't just assume a lot of things. You know, when you grow up and you assume a lot of things, it'll be like, oh, how'd you know that? It just seemed obvious. There's none of that. When you have a new one, you will know, because every single fucking thing, and I mean all kids are the same, but like every single thing is like a new convention that must be explained piece by piece, or they start to realize that life doesn't even really know that it's alive, and that it's already doing this, and knows that it's already doing this and already alive with what it has, and it doesn't even know that it has had a life to not know that it's already doing this and is already alive. Life is very much like that most of the time. And you'll realize that most of us are very old beings, have lived in multiple dimensions. And when you go back through it, it's like, oh, a new little young naked one that is just arriving to the conclusions of this here life and doesn't know any of that stuff. It has to be explained to them. We find it cute, civil, novice, and beautiful. And we love to raise them, and we always appraise them at a high dignity and love and respect for them. So those things are those things. But also, because of psychological pathways and all these other different things, it instantaneously can happen from even like dealing with other people that are psychic or other people that are just like pronounced or premonitious or wives' tale. I forget what the hell is that called. Premonitious or premonitious. And then by the end of it, like, it just happens instantaneously. And the next thing you know, they're living 4 lives, 8 lives, 25 lives, 37, or whatever the fuck. And then before you know it, they're like 42 and you're done or some shit. But then by the end of that, just from shaking some old lady's hand, and then you just know everything that there is to know about India, about about the 2 other countries that you've never visited or known, and then next thing you know everything about Italy, because then India explained Italy to you. It's so much crazy shit like that like it's not really a gift and it's not really like a big deal, but it is something that's like so magical to know that like life does care so much about itself that it didn't even second guess itself. It just kept pushing. It just kept making more of this stuff. It likes crap. It likes stuff. It likes poop. It likes water. It likes water and poop. Lots of water and poop, sir. Lots of water. Did you hear me, sir? Lots of water and poop. I'm gonna need 2 big glasses of water and then whatever the hell is making all that poop. That's right, you heard me. And life is very much into that. Take another Juzabella Jabala and a fucking drink over there. And give me one for that jab over there with the motherfucking rock knockers. You know what I'm talking about. The slapjacks. That's right. Keep them in order. Now, anyway, since life is very... life is very prismatically pronominous, it doesn't really matter what we get back to in the overall of it, in essence. So the real point, and you see how I'm touching with them words, is in case guy got to come back and be like, nah, I want to pronounce this way for the next 4 or 5 things that went wrong. But anyway, or the determination of how that was defined and so on. So, but anyways, back to the fucking point. We get to the more relishing and indulgent part about all of that. The whole grasp of reality and what it's augmented to be, and a comprehension of that, is that there are invisible things around you in life. So as you become a great fighter, a great grappler, a great athlete, a great number counter, you start beating the matrix. The numbers are running in and out of your blood tissue. You don't even know how many breaths you took, but you know it's a fucking lie because you ran faster than your own human breath and you don't know where it came from. Then you feel that squeeze of the fucking turkey that you had for last breakfast from 3 days ago squeeze through your body that you already took 4 shits since that fucking day, and you don't know the fuck why it was smelling like turkey. It ate that fat, squoze through, and then you went. But you know somewhere when you were done with your fucking race, something was off and all that shit was a lie. Now, I'd love to say that entity and multiple realities were helping you, but that's not what it was. You know that was obviously a lie. That was obviously something magical happened, or some, glitch in the matrix. Either that, or you learned how to compete so well that your body had nothing to question about your technical formalities or your fortitude to all of those fucking things. It just kept wrenching out because it already knew that you were working correct, because it was paying attention more to how correct you were going to be than question the past of what it seemed to not give a shit about taking that one shit of the turkey and took all the other poops out. Now, I don't know. It just does stuff like that sometimes. And it's not going to go back and question its own self. It just did not want to poop the turkey that day. It may have wanted to save the muscle tissue for later, something more important. We don't know. The fiber for something more important. We don't know. So anyway, or turkey has certain chemicals in it that can be broken down between green and black. So at some point, the chemical derivation of what the feces was going to look like was inhumanely unhealthy and was going to process through the kidneys instead of the other places where it was supposed to process a little bit more nutrient before its way out. So it processed the turkey later. Who the fuck knows, really? Weird shit like that. Green wire, red wire, blue wire, yellow wire. What the hell is that? Oh. So back to the overall point. Because all of this seems unnaturally indulgent, and that in reality all of these things actually have a meaning, have a real explanation, not to chase power, I still would throw it all away, but don't take anything for granted in what reality is supposed to give birth to things and make things exciting, great, and better for ultimate reason, not to consume each other, not to over-rationalize abuse to each other, to understand that the competition is not greater than what we have to give to mankind or man, but that the reflection back on itself is that, are you complete? Is this complete? Will this be better when we are done? Are we going to be better people for it? Now, by the end of it, you still have to look back on it and be like, well, what's the real point of that? The point is that don't give up on physics because it's all unnatural. It's all ugly. It's all hideous. You don't need to look at it. But if you've ever become something far beyond what you can say to humanity because you're afraid to, or that you don't know where the air comes from, you don't know where the muscle comes from, you don't know where the blood comes from, you don't know where the oxygen comes from, and you're eating like everybody else, and you're eating insanely regular, or you're eating insanely savagely in a very good modern day way that you're supposed to, and you exercise a lot. Good man. That's a good start. But even if you got to those points and those peaks and you still can't fucking explain it, you're right. And if you ever find out anything more in society and you've been chosen to leap as one of those great beings that comes every once in a while to tell us how the hell we're supposed to live a better life and all of that, and you knocked the man down because he thought he was better than you and all that bullshit, you did what the fuck you had to do. And remember that maybe it's a gift for all of us to be able to fulfill the demand of what we think that this fucking physical reality wants and whatnot. Now, let's just say Hypnox falls back and there's only like 5 to 6 of these fucking cards. Hate is not an element for some fucking reason, so I tossed out the whole board. But since you knew that there was all these other fucking things, maybe you try one of the other cards and don't call Hypnox's card. I'm gonna go hide under this fucking rock and live peacefully and happily. But I'll tell you one thing, if you ever discover any of this shit, it looks like shit, but it's obviously a mission objective. And if you do find a good way to complete this, or that you are the right person for all of us, do the fucking job and do it good, and never enslave humankind, because then you'll meet me and I'll be the nicest person in the world and you'll never know why. So anyway, kill them with kindness? Fucking fine now. But either way, the rest of the other 4 or 5 or whatever the fuck, just remember, if you ever learn anything about like how to deal with fucking reality or whatever the fuck, do it some justice while its back is turned. It'll always pay off in the long run. And just remember, if you can't explain it, it's on the board somewhere, and you should keep practicing and become better and stronger or whatever the fuck. I don't know if I had any other fucking point. I think I'll go back and I'll explain some more of these small things that I left out about the greater picture on some of these other things and mild ethnic hallucinations and shit. I think I'll do that for a therapeutic reasons for minorities and ethical people or whatever, or moral people, because I think we're owed that from being, consatiably congested. Consatiable or whatever, consatiable or whatever, for each other's, voids and an overall modestness. So I think we're owed that, so I might have to go back and give a few more speeches about that, just to complete it so that you don't think that you're a psychopath, that Hypnox isn't, what it was really about, how you're going to convolute that into reality, which is, I don't recommend it really, but by the end of it, it's just hope, a glimpse that, like, if the next Olympics can run a record, then we still got work to do. It's still about your relationship with this beautiful thing here we call the invisible ribbon of life, And, beyond secret cults and all this other crazy ass bullshit that's explainable, these things are like back of hand and life and blood to me that like could just app out of me and I don't care. But when it comes to like, the rest of the story that we need from like functioning good people that are able to go the rest of the mile, like that's much more of an important infantile intellectual story to build on for the building blocks of life than it would be for me to go back and be like, oh yeah, the Illuminati disagrees. I have no solidarity with it. The Kabbalah disagrees. And then like going down a list of chain of events and like, no, they disagree. No, they're like fucking whatever. The identity, they disagree. Like, fuck it, and then we'll go, and you go down the whole fucking list and shit. And I will later. But like, it's just like so many things that I have to just go back and be like, even as a modern day young adult with all the prehistory that was there before me, I look back at all of this and I'm like, how the fuck did you guys try to squeeze that in there? They would have definitely disagreed with all those things. 4 out of 5 things, 4 out of 6 things, you out of here. Or 4, right off the bat, I already know 4 of them would have disagreed, and I'm just like, you could fire me and the other guy are forced us to fight, so we never go anything less than like 5 or 3 votes. You know what I'm saying? Like, you had odds with us, or we had odds with you. And you seen us one-on-one, so, suck my dick, we get the real quotes around here. Now I told that guy, suck my dick, suck my toe, kiss my ass, fuck you, man. I don't give a shit. I don't owe him nothing. Tell that dude to kiss my ass. Fuck him. I don't owe him a goddamn thing. Dude, did you know I could go on like that for like an hour and $1.30 and I'd be right for the past 250 years or some shit? Or it'd be like 400 or 500, like 900 so years. I'd be right if I did that. Just kiss my ass, fuck you, man. Or like, all right, let's say modern day world then. Just modern day world. I'd be right for about 200-300 years. I'd have no problems in the modern day world. If I was to kiss my ass, fuck you, man. I don't owe him a fucking thing. Oh, you biting your thumb, man. You kiss my ass, suck my toe. You suck my toe. You confused? Kiss my ass, fuck you, man. This is funny. Like, how would you bet I could put like a 45-minute joint, kiss my ass, fuck you, man, and just like I could go online and cut out little clips of all the times in movies and culture where all these things were the right thing to say. And you would see the derelict, lowbrow motherfucker you've known your whole entire life, type of fucking Guido type of dude, just sitting there, kind of overweight, and he responding to everything on it but with those comments. And you'd still be like, yeah, kiss my bumper. Kiss my bumper, just kiss it. But yeah, but by the end of it, for all fortune and all fortitude, never reflect on the fact that if you ever find this information, understand it, or start to comprehend it, don't reflect on it incorrectly. Take what's for you, go your fucking route, or do what you gotta fucking do so it doesn't get confusing. Anything else that you may or may not have known, if you're not supposed to know it, don't, because that shit is hell, and it's not worth all the struggle or what you should know or shouldn't know. And it's not worth knowing that like because life wanted to save time, that all 5 or 6 of you in your no, you know what, like 23 people all took a dump at around the same fucking time because life tried to save some time. So you could see that in the dimension. It wasn't girls or boys. It was nothing like that. It was just like something like that life does. And you're like, do you really want to know? Or like, so just trust me. Life will be really stupid sometimes and just show you the dumbest things. And you're just like, that's what you were thinking about, Andy? Yeah, man, I saved 45 minutes on taking a dump with you people. With you fucking people. I'm glad for you then, entity. I'm glad that made you happy. Alright, back to some PS4. Or PS5. So anyway. So, shit like that. Or you beat the shit out of it and like you're a brutal idiot and you don't know what the fuck you're looking for, and then it shows you something like 2 people taking a dump, some guy puking, or a car like kind of like running funny, and then one tire is really donut and low, and then like a sea side area by a building, and the water's completely green, and then you like get back around to the city and everything is crystal clear blue, and you're just sitting there and you're like, what the fuck is this story? And it's just like entity just staring at you like, you know, you did something wrong and you don't even know what the fuck it is because you're a brute savage idiot. So you got to be careful about that kind of fucking thing. It's shit like that. And shit like the other thing. And shit like this, that, and the other thing. Like kiss my ass, suck my toes. Go fuck yourself. Fuck you. Why are you sucking my toes? Get off me. I don't owe you a goddamn thing. Fuck you. Kiss my ass, man. I don't owe him a fucking thing. You dickwad. You fucking dickwad. I'm telling you, Earth's funny as shit.